And I call the honourable member for Hughes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased this afternoon now to rise to speak on the Transport Security Amendment, Serious or Organised Crime Bill of 2016. And just before I start on the notes that I had prepared, Deputy Speaker, I'd like to make a quick comment on the member for Grayndler, and I welcome his concern about issues of the seriousness of terrorism that this nation faces. But one thing I would like to point out, the member for Grayndler talked about the highly profitable Sydney and Melbourne airway route. That may very well be true, Deputy Speaker, but I would note someone flying from Sydney to Melbourne tomorrow could get a flight for $102 on Tiger. If they were prepared, Deputy Speaker, to not have any check-in luggage, they could get that price down to $89. And you could even do better than that, Deputy Speaker. If you went on Jetstar and you had luggage, you could travel from Sydney to Melbourne tomorrow for the princely sum of $86. And if you're able to get away with just your hand carriage luggage for an overnight stay, you could fly from Sydney to Melbourne tomorrow for 69 Australian dollars, including GST, Deputy Speaker. And coming back the next day, Sydney to Melbourne again, Deputy Speaker, without any check-in luggage, just your hand carry, you could get back from Melbourne to Sydney to $69. This is what competition does, Deputy Speaker, and something that we should never forget. So although it may be a highly profitable route, and I hope it is, because we need highly profitable companies, Deputy Speaker, but to be able to get a return fare today in 2017 from Sydney to Melbourne back, Deputy Speaker, for what's that, $138, Deputy Speaker, that is what competition does. And we should never, ever forget that. So many people talk about, Deputy Speaker, when you deregulate things, they think the prices go up. The airline industry, Deputy Speaker, is a classic example of what happens when you allow the forces of competition into markets. Back to the specifics of the bill, Deputy Speaker. Now, the coalition government has made a specific commitment of ensuring that people with a history of serious or organised crime would not receive security clearance to work at Australian airports or seaports. And that's exactly what this bill addresses, Deputy Speaker. The purpose of the Transport Security Amendment, Serious or Organised Crime Bill, is to amend the Aviation Transport Security Act of 2004 and also the Maritime Transport and Offshore Facilities Security Act of 2003 to reduce criminal influence at Australia's airports and seaports by strengthening what is known as the Aviation Security Identification Card and also the Maritime Security Identification Card. Now, those cards, Deputy Speaker, they are identification cards that are issued to people, including foreign nationals, who legitimately require unescorted access to secure aviation and maritime areas, including offshore oil and gas facilities, and who have successfully undergone background checks. Now, the problem that this legislation, Deputy Speaker, attacks is that currently there are different eligibility criteria applied to the Aviation Security Identification Card and the Maritime Security Identification Card. And this can result in persons being convicted of the same offence, same criminal offence, being treated differently in the aviation and maritime sectors. So it's that anomaly, Deputy Speaker, that this legislation addresses. There's 5 specific things that the bill does, Deputy Speaker. It will create an additional purpose in the Aviation and Maritime Acts in relation to access to aviation and maritime areas and zones to prevent the use of aviation and maritime transport or offshore facilities in connection with serious or organised crime. And, Deputy Speaker, of course, serious crime does not have to be organised. Establish, the second, Deputy Speaker, establish a regulatory framework supporting the implementation of harmonised eligibility criteria for both the cards, which will better target serious or organised crime-related offences. Thirdly, will clarify and align the legislative basis for undertaking security checking for both cards for the applicants and the holders. Fourthly, allow for regulations to be made prescribing penalties for offences against new serious or organised crime requirements that are consistent with existing penalty provisions across both schemes. And fifthly, Deputy Speaker, it will insert an additional severability provision to provide guidance to a court as to the Parliament's intentions. These amendments, taken together, Deputy Speaker, provide for the implementation of new eligibility criteria for both cards that better target serious and organised crime. The new eligibility criteria will be specific to the aviation and maritime regulations, will introduce new offence categories, such as offences under the anti-criminal organisation legislation, foreign incursion and recruitment offences, illegal importation of goods, and interfering with goods under border controls. Deputy Speaker, further, this bill will continue to give effect to Australia's international obligations under the Convention of International Civil Aviation, the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, and the International Ship and Port Facility Security Codes. It will also improve the government's ability to combat transnational and organised crime. And importantly, Deputy Speaker, this bill actually implements one of the government's key strategies to fight the dreaded menace of the drug ice. Last December, Deputy Speaker, the National Ask Task Force, which was commissioned by this government and chaired by Ken Lay, when it released its final report, made 38 separate recommendations. And one of those recommendations is actually adopted in this legislation. And that was in response to the final report, which was to continue to protect the aviation and maritime environments against organised crime by strengthening the eligibility criteria for holders of both cards. And this bill gives effect to the element of the government's comprehensive package action across these 5 priority areas, which together intend to tackle Australia's ice problem head-on. Now, Deputy Speaker, there's another area that we need to be of specific concern with on our nation's borders for shipping, export and importation of goods. And Deputy Speaker, I draw your attention to the issue of car thefts in Australia. Now, firstly, Deputy Speaker, when it comes to car thefts, there has been some good news. There has been, Deputy Speaker, over the last decade, a significant reduction in the number of cars stolen in Australia. In fact, Deputy Speaker, in New South Wales, per head of population, Deputy Speaker, we have seen greater than a 50% decline, Deputy Speaker, in the number of cars stolen per head of population. This is something, Deputy Speaker, that we should be truly thankful to the New South Wales Police for the work that they've done, the New South Wales Government for the work that they have done at reducing that rate of car theft. But, Deputy Speaker, what is of concern that over the last 12 months we've seen that trend reverse. Over the last 12 months, Deputy Speaker, we've seen car thefts across the nation increase 8.4%. In fact, last year, Deputy Speaker, across the nation we had 55,571 cars stolen. Deputy Speaker, that's almost 1,000 cars a week, 6 cars every hour, or 1 car stolen in this nation every 10 minutes. So, Deputy Speaker, if we were to speak just an hour on this particular piece of legislation, Deputy Speaker, that would be 6 cars across the nation that have been stolen. And, Deputy Speaker, what's of real concern is that when you look at the breakdown on what's happening of car thefts across the nation. Over the last 12 months, Deputy Speaker, we've seen another decline in New South Wales car thefts, Deputy Speaker. Last 12 months, Deputy Speaker, according to the official figures, there's been an 11.7% decline in car thefts in New South Wales. Down, Deputy Speaker, from 13,465 in the previous 12 months, down to 11,893. But, Deputy Speaker, in contrast to New South Wales, we've seen in Victoria a truly remarkable increase in car thefts. In the last 12 months, Deputy Speaker, we've seen a 31.4% increase in car thefts in Victoria in 12 months alone. They've gone from 14,371, Deputy Speaker, up to the last 12 months in Victoria, 18,884. So if we compare New South Wales figures, a larger state with a greater population, with more cars on the road. They have just over 11,000 cars stolen. But in Victoria, Deputy Speaker, it's approaching 19,000 cars stolen. In fact, if someone with a car registered in New South Wales, Deputy Speaker, if you were to drive across the border into Victoria, on the latest numbers, you are 66% more likely to have your car stolen in Victoria than you are in New South Wales. Deputy Speaker, with such similarities between those two great states, something is seriously amiss in Victoria. And Deputy Speaker, the figures are also of concern. That what's actually been happening with car thefts, there's also not only been this recent increase, but we've seen a very large increase in the number of cars that actually vanish completely. If we go back a decade ago, Deputy Speaker, it was only 15% of stolen vehicles were never recovered. So 85%, Deputy Speaker, were recovered. But this year, Deputy Speaker, we've now had 31% of vehicles stolen that are never recovered. So, Deputy Speaker, we've doubled the number of cars that, when they're stolen, are never actually recovered. And, Deputy Speaker, again, those numbers are most dramatic in Victoria. In New South Wales, Deputy Speaker, over the last 12 months of vehicles that are never recovered, we've seen a decline of 18.6%. Again, a tremendous effort by New South Wales, by the New South Wales Government and the New South Wales Police. But in contrast, Deputy Speaker, in Victoria, we've seen an increase of 35.9%, virtually 36% increase of cars stolen in Victoria that are never recovered, Deputy Speaker. And what's also of concern, Deputy Speaker, is that the value of the cars that are never recovered are increasing. So the cars never recovered, Deputy Speaker, are now worth $20,500 each. And it gets worse. It's now shown, Deputy Speaker, that in years gone by, most cars were stolen from shopping centre car parks. But now, Deputy Speaker, it's reported that up to 70% of cars are stolen from outside someone's residence, many times where the car thief breaks into the person's house. So not only, Deputy Speaker, do we have the cost of the car theft and the violation that concerns, but people feel they're breaking into someone's house, Deputy Speaker, is an added crime. In fact, Deputy Speaker, we had the estimated annual cost of car theft in this nation was $763 million. That was by the National Motor Vehicle Theft Reduction Council, but that excluded the community cost associated with police investigations, court costs and corrections. Deputy Speaker, so we are looking at over $1 billion cost to this nation from car theft. Now, Deputy Speaker, one of the issues we need to look at on our borders, there's many reports that many of these cars that are stolen and disappear, Deputy Speaker, are actually being exported. It was noted, Deputy Speaker, back in 2005, one upstanding citizen was jailed for almost 2 years for stealing 48 cars, mostly Toyotas, for export parts to Lebanon under his business. He made, Deputy Speaker, a profit, Deputy Speaker, of between $2,500 to $5,000 a car. It said, Deputy Speaker, a $400,000 theft, and yet he only had 2 years. Now, Deputy Speaker, one of the concerns that's been pointed out is our export process practices of cars, Deputy Speaker. And I quote from Peter McRae, who's an internationally recognised customs broker and senior lecturer in customs banking. And what he said, Deputy Speaker, he says we have black holes in our export process. And I quote, exporting a car from this country is a simple matter. The exporter calls a shipper, company or freight forwarder directly and advises they wish to export a motor vehicle from Australia. The booking is made, the cars are secured inside the container, the export declaration number is processed through Border Force Customs, the container is loaded on the vessel and it exits our shore. He said the paperwork does not require the exporter to record the VIN number, the chassis number of the vehicle, and even if the VIN or chassis number are recorded, there is no requirement from state levels for the registration to be cancelled, produced or verified prior to exporting. Secondly, there is no requirement for the federal government for the VIN or chassis number to be entered, recorded, saved or retained or verified against police registers or being stolen. Deputy Speaker, this growing problem is something that we need to tackle on our borders.